Picture this. You lie down on frozen earth, no fire to warm you, no shelter to shield you. Above, stars glitter cold and indifferent. Around you, the wind howls like a living thing, threading its icy fingers through bones and breath. The temperature is -40 degrees Celsius, and predators prowl the dark. For us, this would be death. For the Neanderthal, this was Tuesday. They didn't merely survive the Ice Age, they adapted to it on a cellular level. Their bodies were sculpted not for aesthetics, but for endurance. Thicker skin, denser bones, a furnace-like metabolism, all working in unison to fight the freeze. Where Homo sapiens would tremble and fade, the Neanderthal endured with silent efficiency. This wasn't luck or brute force. It was evolutionary engineering. Nature didn't mold them to impress. It forged them to outlast. In a world where the night could kill you, every inch of their anatomy was a calculated response to extinction. They were not survivors by chance. They were survivors by design. Take a closer look at the Neanderthal's ribcage, and you'll notice something striking. It's not the tapered, curved frame of a modern human. It's broad, flared, and nearly horizontal. Evolution built them with a purpose: to house a biological furnace. This barrel chest wasn't just a feature. It was a survival mechanism. Inside this cavernous frame lived oversized lungs and a powerful heart, both far larger than ours. Their lungs weren't just for breathing. They were heat engines, capable of inhaling massive gulps of icy air and extracting every ounce of oxygen. That oxygen fed a high-octane metabolism designed to warm blood fast and deliver it to extremities before frostbite could creep in. Their heart didn't beat just to live. It surged to defend. A larger heart meant more blood flow, more endurance, more thermal regulation in sub-zero environments. While we curl up and shiver, the Neanderthal stood tall, inhaled deeply, and lit his internal furnace. He didn't fight the cold by avoiding it. He absorbed it and turned it into strength. In a world of ice, his chest was the hearth of survival. Take a closer look at the Neanderthal's ribcage, and you'll notice something striking. It's not the tapered, curved frame of a modern human. It's broad, flared, and nearly horizontal. Evolution built them with a purpose: to house a biological furnace. This barrel chest wasn't just a feature. It was a survival mechanism. Inside this cavernous frame lived oversized lungs and a powerful heart, both far larger than ours. Their lungs weren't just for breathing. They were heat engines, capable of inhaling massive gulps of icy air and extracting every ounce of oxygen. That oxygen fed a high-octane metabolism designed to warm blood fast and deliver it to extremities before frostbite could creep in. Their heart didn't beat just to live. It surged to defend. A larger heart meant more blood flow, more endurance, more thermal regulation in sub-zero environments. While we curl up and shiver, the Neanderthal stood tall, inhaled deeply, and lit his internal furnace. He didn't fight the cold by avoiding it. He absorbed it and turned it into strength. In a world of ice, his chest was the hearth of survival. To the untrained eye, it's just a big nose, maybe even a punchline. But in the Ice Age, that prominent Neanderthal nose was no joke. It was a high-performance survival device, the difference between life and death when the air itself became a threat. Their nasal cavity wasn't narrow or delicate like ours. It was wide, deep, and cavernous. A natural heat exchanger. With every breath, Freezing air passed through winding passages that warmed it before it reached the lungs. And with every exhale, precious body heat and moisture were retained. It was biology functioning like a thermal regulator. This wasn't about vanity. It was evolutionary engineering. The Neanderthal didn't need a scarf. He had built-in insulation right between his eyes. And here's the deeper truth. That same nose, broad and robust, lives on. It can still be seen today in the faces of Inuit peoples, Siberian tribes, and high-altitude mountaineers. It's an evolutionary heirloom, passed down through the bloodlines of those who endured the cold and lived to pass on their genes. In the Ice Age, survival didn't begin with weapons or fire. It started with the first breath. And the Neanderthal nose? It was the gateway. At first glance, the Neanderthal skull might look primitive. Thick brow ridges, a heavy jaw, and a forehead that slopes back like the hood of a war machine. But to call it primitive is to miss the point. This wasn't a relic of the past. It was a blueprint for survival under siege. The Neanderthal lived in a world of violent encounters, where slipping on ice, colliding with prey, or enduring a swipe from a predator wasn't rare. Their skull wasn't just a casing for the brain. It was a biological helmet. Reinforced and low profile, it spread the force of impact across heavy bone, absorbing trauma that would fracture a modern human's thinner skull. The prominent brow ridges acted like shock absorbers. The powerful jawbones weren't just for chewing. They were the structural braces of a combat-ready head. And the sloped forehead? It deflected rather than absorbed. Like the angled armor of a tank, it was designed to withstand and redirect blunt force. This wasn't about evolution pausing before creating higher humans. It was about evolution building for the battlefield of ice and bone. Because in the Neanderthal's world, strength wasn't just in muscle. It was carved into the very bone. It's true, Neanderthals had massive brains, often exceeding 1,700 cubic centimeters. By sheer volume, their brains were larger than those of the average modern human, even larger than some of history's most brilliant thinkers. But don't mistake size for philosophy. The Neanderthal brain wasn't sculpted for writing poetry or pondering the stars. It was built to command a body designed for survival in a merciless world. Every neuron had a job. Every lobe served the mission of staying alive. This brain managed constant threat assessments, scanning for predators, evaluating ice-covered terrain, tracking wounded prey. It fine-tuned motor coordination for fast, brutal strikes with stone tools. It regulated heat in sub-zero temperatures, monitored pain, and directed power to overworked limbs. Where our species evolved introspection, the Neanderthal evolved reaction. Where we paused to consider, they responded in the blink of an eye. Their intelligence was not theoretical, it was practical. It didn't ask, "Why are we here?" It asked, "Where's the danger?" They weren't less human. They were differently human. Wired not for wonder, but for war. And in that frozen, savage landscape, it wasn't the dreamers who lived. It was the doers. For most of us, fire is life. It's warmth, light, safety. But for Neanderthals, it was a luxury, not a lifeline. When the wind screamed through valleys, and the flames of a carefully nurtured fire were snuffed out by snow or suffocated by ice, they didn't panic. They endured. Unlike modern humans who would huddle and shiver, Neanderthals carried their heat within. Their bodies were engineered for retention. Thick skin acted as a natural thermal shield. Fat was not stored just for famine, It was insulation, strategically distributed across the body to protect vital organs and extremities from frostbite. More than that, they moved, constantly. Their way of life didn't allow idleness. Movement generated heat. Muscles burned calories like a furnace. Even in sleep, their heavy chests rose and fell with deep, efficient breaths, feeding their internal fire. Their survival didn't depend on sparking twigs or guarding embers. It depended on muscle, design, and motion. They didn't build comfort around themselves. They became comfort for themselves. While others froze in fear, the Neanderthal didn't beg for warmth. He was warmth. A living engine, silent, strong, and unstoppable. To the casual observer, the Neanderthal frame might seem off. Short arms, thick legs, a stocky, compressed silhouette. Some have even mistaken it for deformity. But look closer, and you'll see one of nature's most calculated survival strategies at work. In the Ice Age, every inch of exposed skin was a liability. Longer limbs radiated heat, bled energy, and made extremities vulnerable to frostbite. Evolution answered not with aesthetics, but with pragmatism. Neanderthal arms and legs were compact, not clumsy, but conserved. Shorter limbs meant a tighter, more efficient thermal system, minimizing surface area while maximizing survival. But it didn't stop at heat retention. Their limbs were built like scaffolding. Thick bones wrapped in dense muscle, capable of absorbing blunt trauma and carrying heavy loads without splintering. Whether climbing rocky slopes, bracing against charging prey, or dragging carcasses through snow, those limbs were designed to last. There was no room for grace or beauty. Neanderthals weren't built to impress. They were built to outlast. Every anatomical compromise was in fact an upgrade for the world they lived in. In a time when the earth tried to kill you every day, strength wasn't optional. It was the design specification. The Neanderthal gaze wasn't just intense, it was engineered. Their eye sockets were deep, broad and forward-facing, housing large, powerful eyes that weren't just meant to see, but to hunt, judge distance, and detect movement through the veil of snow and darkness. While modern humans struggle with snow glare, squinting against blinding reflections or losing vision in low-light forests, the Neanderthal thrived in such conditions. Their large eyes captured every flicker in the shadows, every shift in the wind. They could spot prey against a background of white on white, a skill that meant the difference between eating and starving. It wasn't just about sight, it was about tracking, about focus, about reading subtle signals in an unforgiving landscape where hesitation killed. Their eyes weren't evolved for aesthetics or social cues. They were tuned for war. Eyes that locked onto a mammoth's flank, tracked a predator's twitch, or scanned the snow for the tremble of a hidden hair. They didn't blink in the cold. They sharpened in it. The Ice Age didn't cloud their vision. It gave them clarity. Where we lose our way in the storm, they found their target. The Neanderthal body was a fortress. Thick bones, dense muscle, a biological shield against a brutal world. But even the strongest walls crack. Their skeletons, preserved in caves and stone beds, tell a story not of invincibility, but of resilience through suffering. Many Neanderthal remains bear the scars of a violent life. Shattered ribs, healed fractures, crushed joints, and worn-down spines. These weren't freak accidents. They were routine. Every hunt risked injury. Every winter tested the limits of flesh. Every day was a wager against extinction. But here's what sets them apart. They didn't heal quickly. They healed hard, without medicine, without rest, without relief. A broken leg could take months to mend, and arthritis came early. But they kept moving, kept hunting, kept fighting, because pain wasn't a problem. It was a companion. They didn't whine. They didn't retreat. They endured, because survival wasn't clean. It wasn't fair. And it certainly wasn't painless. In a time when every breath could be your last, Neanderthals learned to live with pain, not in fear of it. They didn't overcome suffering. They accepted it as part of the cost of being alive. For decades they were cast as loners, grunting brutes wandering the cold, fighting for scraps, dying young and forgotten. But that picture is wrong. Buried beneath layers of ice and misunderstanding is a different truth. Neanderthals weren't just survivors. They were societies. Archaeological evidence shows they buried their dead, not as instinct, but as ritual. They honored the fallen. They tended to the injured, nursing them back to health long after they could contribute to the hunt. In some sites, skeletons show severe injuries that had healed, proof that someone stayed behind, brought food, stood watch, and refused to leave a brother behind. They lived in small, close-knit bands where trust wasn't optional. It was oxygen. In a world where one mistake could mean death for the whole group, they watched each other's backs like soldiers on the front. They shared food, shared warmth, shared grief. Their strength didn't end at the shoulder or fist. It extended into something more powerful. Community. They weren't mindless beasts. They were tribal strategists, bound by blood, burden, and bone-deep loyalty. In the Ice Age, muscle could carry you far, but unity? That's what kept you alive. It's easy to look back and call them extinct, as if they simply vanished, outcompeted, or outsmarted by us. But Neanderthals didn't disappear because they were weak. They were too strong, too specialized, perfectly adapted for a world that changed beneath their feet. They were built for ice, for struggle, for a land that demanded muscle over finesse, instinct over imagination. But when the glaciers receded and forests crept in, their armor, those thick bones, heavy limbs, and deep chests, became burdens. What once kept them alive now held them back. But make no mistake, they didn't lose. They lasted through hundreds of thousands of years of brutal winters, predator hunts, and unforgiving terrain. They thrived in places where modern humans wouldn't last a night. And before their final breath, they left behind more than bones. They left traces in our DNA, echoes in our blood. Some of us carry their genes, but all of us carry their legacy. Neanderthals were never meant to be here forever. They weren't designed for comfort. They were forged for endurance. And when their time came, they didn't fall. They passed the torch to us. If this moved you, subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows. If you felt the chill of ancient wind or heard the heartbeat of a Neanderthal echo across time, then this story did its job. At Prehistoric Shadows, we don't just tell history, we resurrect it. Subscribe, stay curious, and remember, we are descendants of survivors. The shadows behind us still walk within us,